Okay. Whew. Well, we're 20 minutes late, so we're not as late as Nick Rekieta, but that should. Well, we're 20 minutes late, so we're not as late
Yep.
as Nick Rekieta, but that should. Well, we're 20 minutes.
All right.
Late.
Yes, I see it on YouTube. We are good.
That should. We are doing a massive. 1 second. Oh boy, that was quite the echo. Okay, 1 second. Is this? Why is it doing that? Tell me about it.
Me all the time into liking it, and then it does something me all the time I don't like all the time until does not suit me, and then I don't trust it anymore. It's the whole psychological game.
Okay, I think that fixed the problem, the immediate problem, anyways.
Nice thinking on the fly, by the way.
Thanks.
I don't know what you're doing. I couldn't advise you either because I don't know anything about OBS. Just StreamYard and YouTube.
I think I had a hidden tab that was playing the live stream over in a loop, and so every time I talk, because I record the desktop audio from my computer, every time I talk, it transmits it to the live stream, which then plays it back through my ears, which then gets picked up by the recorder and then looped through again. So exactly the problem I warned myself about, and we walked right into it. Hey everyone. Hopefully you didn't angrily click off in that time. Glad to have you here. My name's Tim. You're watching Lost in Law. Joining me today, Tracy from Calming the Chaos. Say hello.
Hello, I'm Tracy from Calming the Chaos podcast, and I'm here with my friend Tim today and following his lead because he leads so well. Last time I was on here, I was showing you my poison shock pen that I had just bought, and I have learned since how to use it.
Oh no. So that's right. Definitely don't go crawling through the window after dark, or you'll learn how it gets used as well.
Exactly. Yeah, I've been practicing with my eyes closed to find the actual part of it here that needs to be activated, and I'm pretty good at it now. I just did it. See? So I can do it with my eyes closed.
As long as you don't use like if you ever have to use a gun for self-defense, as long as you don't, translate that technique to using a handgun.
Yeah, we don't have those here at our house, and I'm not going to do this little trick anymore. This is not cool. I'm just going to it looks so much like a pen. I just carry it, and if it's over here and something happens, I can just very quickly activate it.
So do you deal like day to day? Do you deal with a lot of people that would necessitate such a device, or is that more of general protection? Like, do you have an enhanced safety requirement?
Yeah, no, the people that I work with, no, absolutely no. They don't. They would never hurt me like that. I've never had anybody. I've had somebody come close, but it was an adolescent, and you know how they get. They all yeah, very emotional, and they only just walked out and threw a hissy fit.
Teenagers.
But this is just for general protection.
Tell me it ain't so.
Very, very much so. Like slamming doors and all that other stuff. So somebody threw a pillow at me one time, and
how dare they?
Yeah, it didn't hit my head, so I was happy it didn't mess up my hair.
All right.
Oh my goodness.
I'm watching the stream on my phone and it looks okay. It at least sounds okay. So let's get into our topic today.
Yeah. All right.
Thankfully.
Yeah.
only going to spend about an hour longer on here because then I have to go and argue appeal. So let's. The topic I wanted to talk about is an interrogation technique used by both Canadian and American police when they're trying to when they have some sort of suspicion that they think they have the correct person who committed the crime, and it's a type of very psychologically intensive interrogation technique. It's meant to produce a confession. It's meant to overcome someone's, I guess, their ability to lie and their. It makes them really weigh the cost and benefits of accepting the punishment versus lying and getting away with it. And well, and of course, anytime, Tracy, you have something to share, any insights for what we're talking about, just go ahead and interrupt me, jump in, because other other than that, we'll first cover what the Reid technique is,
Mhm.
because that's always a good starting spot, is telling people what we're talking about. Um,
Mm.
the origin of the technique, I read into the origin, the article I sent you about the
Mhm.
very first person that they proved conclusively they obtained a false confession out of it. Um, it was this criminologist who was working in Chicago, who and his name was Reid. It was named the technique is named after him, and he had developed this type of questioning that is very torturous to someone's psychological well-being, and it's supposed to lower their. I guess when you, I don't know, Trace, can you speak about kind of what people go through mentally when they're actively lying to someone? Especially like a very complex, complicated lie, like if they're trying to confront their spouse over cheating allegations, or when parents try to confront their children. Can you talk a little bit about what goes into lying and what kind of stress it is?
Well, I am not a liar myself, but I can imagine what it's like for people to go through it. It's interesting though, because there's an inherent power dynamic between the cops and you, right? So if you are guilty or they have evidence to believe that you are guilty of something, then they have even more power. And because then they know. And so they come from that assumption that you are guilty because they probably have something pinning you to the crime.
Yeah.
I think of Sarah Boone, you know, and those interrogators, I don't know that they strictly use the Reid technique at all because the one female interrogator in that case was not a fan of Sarah's at all. So never tried to make nicey nice with her whatsoever. But they did sort of surprise her with that videotape
Mhm.
in the midst of the technique. And that really threw Sarah off balance right there. And so that inherent power balance is unnerving to people to begin with, no matter if you're innocent or guilty. But if you're guilty, then it's got to really freak you out, especially when they use this technique, because the very first thing they do is they try and make you comfortable where your friends were just trying to get information. And then they say something like, okay, we know you did it. We just need to know why, and we've got evidence.
And get it
And
off your
then they're
chest. That's a common
and then
technique, right? Make peace with God, get it off your chest. It would be easier on your conscience if you just confess.
that's later on, but what happens is the crapping of the pants happens next,
Yeah.
right? Because then they and that so that's psychologically when that goes through your mind and your body gets involved. I mean, you can literally crap your pants. I don't know her last name. Her first name is Susan, but she went through this interrogation that lasted for hours. She, in fact, had killed many people in the state of Oregon by feeding them to her, shooting them and feeding them to her pigs. I don't know if you've ever heard of that example. Oh my
Sounds like
gosh,
what
that
Robert Picton did.
yeah, and she was one of those people who may not have had a really high IQ, and but then she actually did crap her pants during the interrogation, and
Mhm.
I know I just I love watching that part. And in fact, I don't know which channel aired it, but I went ahead and commented and timestamped the pants crapping because that really is what happens. Is that adrenaline happens, and then sometimes crap happens, and or people will freeze. They'll go
Yeah.
into various states of shock, fight, flight, or freeze, and then their mind will race to try and figure things out. That was really apparent in the interrogation of Russell Williams. You could
Yes.
just see the wheels start to turn with him, and in that case, I believe they had pictures or they had some video footage or track marks, tire marks, something that they could definitely tie him to the murder of a specific person. And in fact, I think there was other people that he was tied to anyway. But I guess
Under under this technique, they can actually just they don't even need the evidence. They can fabricate it. And that's
they don't even have to tell the truth. Exactly.
yep.
I've got a videotape. Um, I have not seen anybody ask to see the videotape. Show me the videotape.
They don't have
Um,
there's no obligation to produce, right? We're not at the discovery stage yet, so there's no obligation on the police's part to produce. There is one small caveat that so I did a video on this. This is kind of the inspiration for this topic. I did a video reviewing the case law of Oikel. We touched a little bit on Hart as well. Oikel was someone who was interrogated by the police for I think it was like 14 hours. Um, and the court, it went to the Supreme Court and they laid out the test of, okay, at what point was the confession involuntary or unreliable? And so, and we trace this way back to English times, right? From the English common law. The whole point of a confession is, it's the suspect telling you that they are guilty, that they committed the crime, and you are reasonably certain that they are being truthful in that confession. The reliability of the confession is the utmost concern that the court system has. That's why we forbid torture, drugs, right? Truth serums. All of those, as you might know, are unreliable for producing a confession. People will misremember things. People will say they did something that they didn't do. If you've ever tried lying to your parents before, sometimes you just take blame. Sometimes you'll just take the blame because you know that whatever punishment's coming your way isn't nearly as bad as trying to explain the complicated chain of events as to how it's not your fault. And
right.
it's not like you're totally guiltless, so you probably were there. You were probably a witness. Um, but perhaps you're really high on you're doing drugs with your friends, and then one of them gets a stupid idea, jumps and ambushes someone. You just don't really remember who actually pulled the trigger. And if the police
Right.
interrogate you with this like severe psychological stressor, it may plant a memory in your head. They keep telling you you did it. You may start believing that. Um, and can you speak a little bit to the how people react to trauma? Because like this borders on a type of psychological torture. Now, the courts have found that this is actually a valid and proper technique. The language of the Canadian Supreme Court was, we need to give police the tools to be able to do their job. In an evolving and ever-changing world, we don't want to step in and micromanage everything they do and start second-guessing and questioning them. Certainly, when they overstep their boundary, we'll be sure to let them know and put them back in line. But can you speak a little bit to the how someone may react to trauma and why that might produce a false confession?
Yeah, if they have even if they have pre-existing trauma, then they would maybe react even sooner. But so yeah, they definitely would be under duress and under maybe some circumstances like they wouldn't be able to get any water or food, or like they could be in a cold environment or some sort of a, and they could be there for hours or they could be left alone. But I think what it is this whole idea of I don't know what's going to happen to me. And even if you're innocent, and it is one of those false confessions that you're going to make because you just want to get out of the holding area, it's definitely because of the duress that they're put under because of the power dynamic that is, again, inherent. With trauma, that happens all the time, because of the power dynamic that usually happens with abuse or neglect or something like that. And I'm telling you, if you're in, I don't even know, I've never been in an interrogation room. I would think that if I was there for hours and hours on end, I would start to panic. Because like, why aren't they letting me out? Well, they're saying that you're free to leave. So every little uncertainty is going to cause you
Yep.
trauma, stress, anxiety, and if you have pre-existing trauma, then it's going to come up like almost right away. And I think I saw that with Sarah Boone at first. She didn't know why she was there and why they were questioning her so harshly at first, and then she found out when they showed her the video of her boyfriend locked in the suitcase. Isn't that fun? And her saying all that stuff. That's my name. Don't wear it out. You haven't seen that
Yeah.
that film is just priceless. Just the way that she is just like, I don't want to see this anymore. Oh, okay. Well, can you explain what's going on?
Uh,
I don't know.
our friend Ken, he did a breakdown of the Michael Rafferty interrogation. He had abducted, killed, and brutally, many things to an 8-year-old girl in Ontario. And the police, his girlfriend flipped on him, and the police picked him up and they gave him a very intense interrogation. Now, one of the things that came out of Oikle was some guidance from the courts on where the line is. One of the things that they pointed to specifically was the withholding of food and water and bathroom breaks. Um, but you have to ask for those. And in that power dynamic, you may not feel comfortable asking your interrogator for a cup of water or
Right.
to use the bathroom. But the court
Yeah.
said, like, someone who doesn't ask doesn't get to turn around and say, well, they never gave me the opportunity. Well, you never asked. You're an adult. You should be able to do it. Even like in Canada, you cannot charge someone under the age of 12 with a crime. The Reid interrogation has been used on young offenders. And there's, I'm looking at this Wikipedia article right now, and underneath this section, it'll say one of the big criticisms is that this technique is a little too overbearing on young offenders, people with intellectual or cognitive
Yep.
difficulties. Um,
And non-native speakers too.
yes,
Yeah, people
people
who,
who speak
yeah,
English as a second or third language,
exactly. Yeah,
because
they
they don't
have
get the
the
nuance.
highest. Yeah, and they have the highest rate of the false confessions too. The
Hmm.
ones that are saying like, "Okay, tell me what I need to say. I just need to get out of here." They don't really know their rights. It was one of the comments that I saw under one of the videos I watched was I want my lawyer beats the Reed technique any day. I want a lawyer.
Which there is, you know, uh, any delay in the police helping you obtain a lawyer would be grounds for dismissal of any subsequent confession, even if there is some sort of time separation between the two. It
Mhm.
follows that the chain of events, you lost your agency as a person to make the because the confession has to be voluntary. It has to be willing. It loses all of its reliability if it's an unwilling confession.
Yeah, because 'cause can't they look at the video footage and see that it's coerced, or
Hmm.
if they can look at the context of how they got the person to say what they said and how much duress they're under, all that stuff. They
And
can see that now because they're required, I believe, to have active cameras, video and audio in the interrogation room.
in Canada, that's only a guidance, but I don't know of any major police force that doesn't follow that guidance. Certainly,
Mhm.
there would be a lot of questions if you produced a written confession without any type of recording that backs it up. We'll see when we flip over to the police handbook that they have, and they have body cams too. So they certainly have provisions in their police training handbooks to ensure that recordings are taking place, and that there's severe disciplinary penalties for stopping or ending recordings with without any proper explanation as to why you're ending the recording. such
Yeah.
as you're about to violate someone's rights, and so maybe you're just going to put your hand over the camera. So
Yeah, I'm sure that happens, but, it's interesting, and you'd like to think that everybody's got a nice their video is on, their audio is correct, and no technical difficulties are happening, and we're getting a fair representation of the type of interrogation they're going under, but you never know.
and you alluded
Um,
to the you I mean it's the good cop bad cop, which is a separate technique, and you'll see how it actually reinforces Reid when we go through some of the steps. We should probably do take care of that right away so people know what we're talking about. They're not able
yeah.
to read the screen. um
Yeah, this is the 9 steps. You've got them up, on the screen here of the
I should be able
interrogation.
to there we go, I should
There
be
you
able to
go.
zoom that in. um
Mhm,
Make that words a little bigger, hopefully that's readable to everyone. But
mhm,
we'll start with the first step, obviously, and that's the positive confrontation. You know, advise the suspect that the evidence has led the police to the individual as the suspect, and offer the person an early opportunity to explain what happened.
mhm.
Um, this is where good cop, bad cop plays, because if you're being the bad cop, this isn't going to work. So you can't get to step one unless the person trusts you in some way. But that's how you can build artificial trust over a very limited period of time with good cop, bad cop. And we'll see it in. I have an example from the popular TV series Law and Order. We have a very good example of that. Both of those techniques working together. Um,
Yeah.
and from that, so I mean, it goes to the suspect, and oftentimes that's why it's the first step. Oftentimes, people will not take that early out. They think they're smarter. They think they can beat it. Sometimes they're just told play stupid until the lawyer shows up, which is not terrible legal advice, but it's certainly. I mean, this channel cannot give legal advice, so it's not any advice. But
Mhm.
playing stupid until the lawyer shows up isn't the worst thing you could do.
Or just not say anything. I guess that wouldn't probably shorten the interview or lengthen it. Who knows? They
Yeah,
might
like
just
if
leave you in there for a couple hours.
there is some case law. If you tell the police that I'm going to exercise my right to silence, I'd like to speak to my lawyer, and they keep you in the interrogation room and just keep trying to break down your barriers, that would be seen as excessive or oppressive police conduct. Certainly, they're allowed to ask you more than once, but then the court has said, well, 17 is too many. So somewhere between once and 17 is where the line is. But yeah,
Once
they
in
just kept hammering
17.
this guy, right? Talk to us, talk to us. Nope, nope, I want to call my lawyer. Okay, yeah, here's the phone. You can call your lawyer. So he calls his lawyer. Lawyer tells him, do not talk to the police. I'll be there in a few hours. So he hangs up, um, and he says, my lawyer's advised me not to talk to the police. And the police will say, yeah, okay, we understand it. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about the weather. Do you have any family? How's everyone doing? By the way, do you want to make a statement to us? No, I was told not to talk to you. And they went through that 17 times over the span of 6 hours.
Aren't they supposed to, and I know I think it's like this in the United States, is once you assert your Miranda right to get a legal representation, they are supposed to stop the questioning.
Yes,
And
yes.
yeah,
And that's what the court said. The inability to now again, the line is somewhere between 1 and 17, and the court declined to actually give you an exact number. It's going to be context specific. Um,
right. Hmm.
sometime, and the court recognized there are some times where, especially if the crime is ongoing or there's a co-conspirator, that time is of the essence, and it might justify uh, a little bit more sustained interrogation when they think that someone else may be hurt. For example, when they picked up the you remember that the one of the 9/11 terrorists was actually picked up by TSA or the FBI. No, yeah, the FBI arrested them before 9/11. But the person didn't break. They weren't able. They didn't reveal that um, they were planning this attack. They only discovered after the fact that guy was supposed to be on the airplane, but they picked him up for some other reason. Um, I think maybe he got turned
Wow.
around at the border or something. Man, that was so long ago. Now I forget the
I
details.
know, I forgot too. And
It was
I wasn't
the Shanksville flight, the one that crashed in the field in Pennsylvania. There was like one less terrorist on board because he had gotten arrested maybe a day or two before.
The day before. Ah, yeah, I wasn't much into true crime back then,
No, well, and I was a
or
kid. I was a kid back then, so my
yeah,
memory is
uh,
really fuzzy on that one. But anyways, that just goes to show that, especially when now they didn't suspect there was a wider crime there, so they may not have seen the urgency in interrogating him. But if you know that I picked up like one co-conspirator, but that hasn't ended the danger, especially if we're talking like a terrorist attack, it may justify a more harsh interrogation because of the protection of lives at stake. So
right.
that, like, the court has refused to put like a number in the or a line in the sand, right, and say, well, here's how many times you have to say no, and the police will stop questioning. It's
Yeah.
very context and case specific. So the second point here is to try to shift the blame away from the suspect to someone else in their set of circumstances. It's not your fault, Tracy. You did what you had to do. You know,
Mhm.
she, especially in a domestic context, right? Your partner wouldn't leave you alone. They just wouldn't stop. I understand. I get it.
Yeah, the minimizing of the moral consequences, right? And so that the person can save face. And so here's why it's understandable to me why you did it. So we're still under this whole assumption of guilt, really. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this is not innocent until proven guilty right now. This is not the Reid technique. The Reid technique is only to be used on people we have reasonable evidence of being guilty of whatever it is they're being accused of. And so then we're just saying like how it makes sense that you're guilty of
Yep.
what you've been accused of. And then it helps. I don't know what it does in the psychology anyway, is it provides some like, yeah, he's on my team. He gets it. He totally gets it. And then at that point in time, if it didn't come in the first step, the confession could come at the second step where they just feel so validated. And yeah, he gets me. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and tell him the story then because I feel like we're on the same page here. Uh, yeah, it's just you let down your guard. And it's a brilliant technique if you do it when you know that there's some really solid evidence against them,
Yeah. But
right?
if the evidence is so solid, then a confession isn't necessary. So what the Breed
That is
technique
true.
bridges is you have an intuition or a gut instinct that this person is guilty, but you won't be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt without the confession.
All right, because that happened with Chris Watts. Now, when they brought him in, they had gotten his phone, and he had wiped a lot of the stuff between him and his mistress clean, and so he thought he was pretty much scot free. But they had a bunch of photos and proof that he was having an affair with somebody. And when they asked him the first day, "Are you having an affair?" and he said, "Absolutely not. You know, I've never cheated on my wife and this and that." They actually let him go home that first night, even though they knew he was lying. But they told him to come back the next day and asked him to do a polygraph, and he said yes. And so he came back.
Well, they,
You know, I guess the point is that they had the information that he had been having an affair, and then him and his wife were having problems, and they knew they just had this sort of sense, but they didn't have enough. They needed a confession.
mm-hmm.
And so then the combination of the polygraph, which is, I think, the way Reid was developed, is to be used
Yep.
in conjunction with a polygraph, and then the
Reed
psychology.
Reed was a polygraph administrator. That was his the detective Reed. He was I think a PI at the time when he developed the technique. And yes, it's supposed to be used in concert with the polygraph, but as he discovered, it can be used in concert with any evidence. Um,
Right.
Now, I'm glad you brought up the polygraph because the court in Canada gave some guidance on how you cannot use the polygraph. We all know that polygraphs are not admissible in court. There is a question as to their reliability. They are fairly reliable, but not enough for court use. Um, and typically it is the circumstances around the polygraph that betrays more than the polygraph test itself. For example, a lot of people will get busted googling how to cheat a polygraph. Guys, use incognito mode at the very minimum. I mean, ISP still knows that you looked it up, but at least don't make it so obvious, right?
Yeah. Or go to the library and use their internet or something like that.
Or get yeah, but
But
you'll get caught on the camera and they'll have the log from the library, right?
see, this is why I'd make a really bad criminal, Tim. It would not be good. Yeah.
No, like break into someone's house, use their computer, turn off the webcam,
Mm.
and Google how to cheat on a polygraph because that is more incriminating than anything the polygraph can spit out. All it does is and I think there's a lot of misconceptions to what a polygraph does, right? All it does is measure your stress reaction in
Mhm.
a moment compared to your baseline.
And isn't it true that cops can lie about you failing the polygraph?
Yes,
They
they
could
can.
just say you failed it, even though you
Yep.
passed it. They could be lying about that. And I don't know if they did that with Chris Watts or not, or if he just failed it and they were telling the truth. But yeah, he ended up failing the polygraph. Could they have been lying to him?
They did that to
Possibly.
Oikel, the name of the
Mm.
person that brought this to the Supreme Court. And I believe Daryl Parker, the other article I shared with you, I believe
Hmm.
Daryl Parker had failed. They told him they failed the polygraph too. And they're allowed to tell you that you failed. What they cannot tell you is that the polygraph will be used as evidence in court. Now that's interfering because police are not officers of the court per se. That's lawyers. Lawyers are officers of the court. And
Hmm.
bailiffs are the security of the court, but they're not. The police do not get to decide what goes to court. That's not their. That's not their function. That's not their role in our justice system. So any promise they make or any insinuation that they have that ability to control what goes to court is flat out wrong. That's where the idea of quid pro quo comes from. Hey, if you confess, we'll cut your girlfriend free. We won't charge her. That's not your call, police. That is the DA's
Hmm.
call. That's the Crown Prosecutor's call. Um, and the
Yeah,
judge is the one who admits or excludes evidence, not the police.
right.
The police are merely witnesses. When you're in a courtroom, they are just witnesses. The police have no special power that no other witness has in the court. They're not even expert witnesses unless you're like a forensic pathologist or not, a doctor. Anything
Hmm.
with, the expert background, the firearms expert. But like police detectives, patrol officers, they're not experts. They're not qualified as experts. They can't give opinions. Um,
Right.
the one exception is you can give what's called the layman's opinion, testifying that someone appeared drunk because and the court has ruled that police have enough experience dealing with intoxicated and drunk drivers.
Impaired.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they have formulated a reliable opinion as to what looks drunk and what doesn't look drunk because it's hard to put into words how you can tell someone looks drunk, but most lay people can tell when someone is drunk.
Mhm. Or
Like
you
in
could, point to objective, like, sort of like,
swaying,
a
slurring.
smell of alcohol, slurring words, and swaying. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But on step number 2 is more like there's coddling them,
Yep.
by the police and really trying to get this person to put a confession out at this point. And so sometimes they don't, right? Sometimes they will start to deny things or they'll try and explain things, right? And so that's when step number 3 comes in.
Yeah. So what this step is saying is that you can't. It's very similar to the questioning technique used by cross-examining lawyers. Don't give the witness an opportunity to go off script. Right? Ask them close-ended questions. Are you sure you saw this? Yes. Did you see the person shoot? Did you see person A shoot person B? Yes, I did. Did you hear the gunshot? Yes, I did. Did you see a gun? Yes, I did. What color of pants was he wearing? Blue. Right? Don't give him open-ended questions. Well, what did you think about the suspect, or how did you feel when you heard the gunshot? Don't give him a chance to
Exactly.
go off script, right? And that's what point number 3 is. Minimize the number of times you throw the conversation over to the suspect. That gives them the chance to build their confidence, to build kind of their wall around the truth. Because
Yep.
what's common, a common thing you're going to find here is that most people have something to hide, even if they didn't do the crime, because you don't end up as a suspect by having zero connection to the crime. You may have a wrong place, wrong time connection, right? You may know the person who is the victim, So you have some sort of connection to that crime. Oftentimes, people are not willing to be upfront about the extent of that connection. And so you would have a reason to lie, even if you are innocent, which is why
Mhm.
lawyers tell you, like, get a lawyer. That doesn't mean you're guilty. You could be
Right.
perfectly innocent and still have problems talking to the police.
So true. I mean, I'm thinking about the interrogation of Stephanie Lazarus, if you can remember that one. Who can forget those eyes, those crazy eyes? And, just they had this one tactic that they used with her when her old boyfriend, she killed her old boyfriend's wife out of jealousy. And then years later, and she was a police officer, years later, the police, caught on to her, and they asked her if she knew, I forget his last name, but they mispronounced his last name. And she was trying to go, I don't know. And then she pronounced it correctly, but it was after a really long period of time. If she
Ah.
and somebody had said if she had been innocent, she would have realized, she would have just said, "Oh, you mean blah blah blah," and this is the way he pronounced his last name. And they did it intentionally because they wanted to see if she was gonna be truthful, and they knew that she wasn't going to be. And so they can use little tactics like that, or they can use really big dishonest ones like, "You failed your polygraph and we know you did this, so we just wanna understand why."
Hmm.
And then they start to explain and or deny, and this is where you just try and minimize that frequency of denials.
Then you get
Yeah.
into the next step is then you start giving them outs. Give them potential outs. At this point, the accused will often give a reason why why they did not commit or could not commit the crime, and then use this. So where I was getting at, where most people have something to lie about, um, what you want to do under this technique is get whatever they're hiding out into the open. And so,
Mhm.
yes, I was having an affair, but I didn't kill her. Right?
Mhm.
That's step 4 is to get you to that point. Give them the out. Well, she accused you of having an affair. That's very, and you know what? That's your business. Having an affair is not a crime. And he's like, "You're right. Having an affair is not a crime." And you know what? She was horrible. She treated me awful. I had to go some.
Mhm.
Give them the out. Give them the ability to justify that. Now they're not confessing to the killing just yet, but they're saying like, "No, no, no. Now you've actually admitted the motive."
Mhm. Well, that's exactly what they did with Chris Watts, and they finally just said, "Hey, we've got the pictures, we've got the text messages, we know her name, you work together." And then when he admitted just exactly what you said, "Well, so, yeah, I was having an affair, but I didn't do anything to hurt my daughters and my wife." And, but they used it later on, to be able to, help him to, like, establish a motive.
Yep. Number 5 is I don't know if that why that's a separate step, but this is where good cop really starts playing in, because if someone is starting to crack under the interrogative pressure, this is a good time to switch, to have a shift change with the detectives, and bring someone in who like brings the guy a coffee. We saw this with the Michael Rafferty interrogation, where the second detective brought the guy a nice cup of coffee. He had been crying. He felt really sick. So he bought a nice warm cup that he could hold on to and find comfort with the heat coming from the cup.
Mm,
Um, and I
well,
mean, obviously you don't want a too hot of a cup if you think he's going to
no.
throw it at you. But I mean, in this case, they're dealing with someone who's gone quite feeble. And so they didn't fear for, the police didn't fear for their safety. Um, so they were happy to give him like a hot cup. I think it was coffee or tea. I don't remember, but and so you come in and like, oh, it was Tim Hortons. It was like a double double from Tim Hortons, of course, because Canadian.
Mhm. Well, you've already seen in steps 3 and 4 the breaking down of the suspect right there by, the whole denials and then objections, and, just being able to just shut them down, shut them down, shut them down. So by step 5, if they still haven't confessed, then they're pretty withdrawn. So that's probably why step 5 is in there, I thinking, is because psychologically you would be completely exhausted probably by this time because you're trying to either make an excuse or I don't know, there's any number of things you can be uh, presenting diversions or non-answers or protests or aggression or manipulation or any of those things that you've been trying to do, but by step 5 all that stuff's pretty much thrown out or negated, and that power dynamic comes back. You're exhausted, you're worn down, and so number 5 comes in to where you just want to make sure that you draw in closer and make sure that they haven't gone anywhere. Like, don't go away from me here. Um, yeah.
This is something I've seen used to varying effectiveness. Like sometimes the police will say, "Yeah, we saw a surveillance camera, and it was actually, there was someone who didn't look like you running away from the scene of the crime," and they'll just latch onto that, and be like, "Yeah, it was him. It had to have been him," right? Sometimes they're a lot more subtle. I guess it's context specific, and I don't know exactly kind of what tips to balance either way, but yeah, the idea that you open up alternative explanations to what happened. This is especially useful when there's an accidental killing, or I guess accidental is not the right word. Unintentional killing, which becomes a manslaughter instead of a murder, right? So if you get him to plead guilty to manslaughter, murder isn't very far from that. You just have to prove intent. But if you can
Right.
say, I was there, I pushed, and he fell down the stairs, but I didn't mean to, we were fighting, and things got out of hand, and you start offering these, like, ways to out, right? Out of the guilt of murder, but you're walking them straight into the trap of confessing to something else. Now you're confessing that you were there, you were confessing that you had an argument, you confess that you were interacting with the person who's now dead. Um,
Right.
or
Yeah. Yes.
or things that are
So
provable wrong, right? The more subtlety is, maybe you were at the bar that night really late, and they'll just latch on to that. Yeah, yeah, I stayed late at the bar, but you know that he wasn't at the bar because you already talked to the barkeep and said he left at exactly this time, right? So again,
yeah.
you're using the knowledge of what you do know and starting to craft this very complicated maze that you're trapping this person in, and it
Hmm.
has to be careful because if they don't believe you, the key of number 6 is they have to believe what you're saying is true. If they don't believe the alternative that you have offered, then you lose them.
I love it. It says that the suspect cries at this point in for guilt. Yeah, I mean, I would think that some crying would happen at this point in time because they are offering these alternatives, but like it's okay. In the thing that I sent you, the funny parody, they had a picture that they're showing the guy at the time. They said, "Is this dress black and white or is it purple and gray?" And it's neither one. And they're like going, well, what wait a minute, like, and so you're there, are you gonna confess to one count of a better crime, or not a lesser crime but a greater crime, or two counts of a lesser crime? And so people get awfully confused and they might cry, and so then apparently you're supposed to go in like a cobra and infer guilt.
Yep.
Which is like, and for the sake of the family can come in at this point in time. You should confess for the sake of the victim's
That's 8.
family. They need to have peace. Okay, that's 8.
7 is
Okay.
actually where you give that's so you were moving towards step 7 and step 6, right? They're quiet,
Yeah, I
they're listening,
prematurely
you're
moved.
doing all the talking at this point. Step 7 is where you actually give, okay, here's what I think happened, and you show two scenarios, and one is more socially acceptable than the other. So my example of, we had a fight and then he fell down the stairs, but I didn't mean to push him, I didn't mean to hurt him, right? Then the other one is, well, I pushed him down the stairs on purpose,
Mhm.
because that's a murder.
Yeah. Right. It's again going back to that wholly morally, what's less blameless,
Yeah.
or what's more blameless morally. And so you're trying to save face again, which is always more attractive than being a criminal that was premeditated.
One is more socially accepted than the other. It wasn't my
Yeah.
fault. I had to do this. Sometimes when there's a crime against random people, and the motive was desperation, right? I needed money, you needed food. Like, I get it. You were hungry, you're starving, your stomach's rumbling. You had to rob that store. You had no choice. And of course, they'll latch onto your now the key here is that you still have to force them to admit that they committed a crime. So the other alternative still has to be a crime. So get them to admit to the theft, then you can nail the robbery. Because remember, robbery is just theft with violence, or the threat of violence. So
Yeah.
the difference between theft under 5,000 and an armed robbery is simply, or even just robbery without the weapon modifier. Um, the difference is if you go to like a convenience store and you simply reach in and grab cash from the till and then run away. That's a theft. Now, if you
Right.
at any point threaten the clerk, hey, step back or I'll knock you out, or don't tell anyone, or don't call the cops, or any type of aggressive maneuver towards the clerk, that's where you have taken a theft and made it a robbery. In Canada, robbery is punishable up to life in prison. Now,
Hmm.
most simple convenience store like robbery covers a very wide range of crimes. A simple convenience store grabbing $100 from the till isn't going to get you life in prison. It will get you a pretty good prison sentence, though, a pretty severe one, because a robbery is considered a very serious crime because of that threat and violence modifier. Um,
So on number 7, where it says there's always a third option, which is to maintain that they did not commit the crime, does that mean that if there's nothing else, then they can just say, "Well, okay, maybe you didn't do it." And I don't know how that would be effective with the Reid technique, but I don't know that I've seen it done. It could be, but then,
I think this is just this is meant to. You're not supposed to press the issue. I think this is just guidance
mhm,
to the interrogator that if the suspect is still maintaining their composure, then they're choosing the third option, which is that I wasn't there, I didn't commit the crime. Um, and that's
right.
where you have to go back to step one. So put him back in his cell, let him think about it some more, and then come back to step one because this is the ending of the technique here. When you get to okay, you haven't broken him at this point. You didn't break him.
That's what they did to the pig lady, Susan. They did that too. They're like, okay, well, if you didn't do it, then you didn't do it. And just go back to your cell. And then she started to remember things after a little bit in her cell. Brought her back in for questioning. It was a really long ordeal. So okay, now that makes sense there. And
Mm-hmm.
then they go back to step number 1 again.
Hey,
Um,
shout out to Pet Brett in chat, hanging out again. Good to have you, man.
yeah.
Um, oh, step 8 is this is the point where you've broken the suspect. So at this
Yes.
point, they're crying. They said that they did the lesser crime. And this is where you start. This is now, Tracy. I want you to talk a little bit more about the piling on effect, right? This is the point where you have broken this person completely down, and now you are just You're going harder and harder at them, right? Oh,
Hmm. Well,
here's the family of the victim. I want you to face them. Um, or
mhm.
so and so said she saw something. Is she telling the truth or is she lying? Right? You start confronting them with this corroborating evidence. There's two reasons for that, but can you talk about the piling on effect?
The piling on effect of telling people that that there's a lot of other things at stake here, like
Oh
how
no, like
people.
I
I'm
mean
thinking
when
about Russell Williams is like at this point in time they're wanting all the details. I think by step 8 they're just like
yeah.
wanting more, like, okay, well, so he's admitted he did it, but now they're wanting all the details for the family. They want to know where the body is. They want to know all of this stuff. After all this time they finally get the convention, the confession, and this guy's telling them all of this other detail stuff, like, ugh, just grew. Yeah, I don't think that's what you meant by piling on, though.
Okay, what I'm getting from step 8 is that they'll bring another detective in and say, tell detective so and so what you told me. Even though there's a reason that you tell the
Oh,
suspect,
in front of
right?
witnesses,
Yeah.
right?
Um, and I believe the witnesses in this context is other like detectives, possibly forensic analysts, other experts,
Oh
not
gosh.
necessarily like seen eyewitnesses. Especially because typically these cases involve circumstantial evidence. There was no eyewitness, but
Mhm.
when you talk to the bartender, he said, "Well, he left exactly at 5:50." Um, that might be the type of witness they're getting at, but I'm inclined to believe that they're asking more about like other officers, people involved with the case, like, "Hey, tell Detective so and so what you told me." This is
Got it.
this is the child, this is child welfare. This is the child welfare caseworker. Tell her what you told me, and we can have, we can get people taken care of. Right. This is where you're sort of exploiting. Not if you've broken them, you're exploiting the hole that they left.
It creates shame, definitely would if you have to do it over if you have to say it over again is always gonna be difficult, because it's not easy to admit something, even if it's a false confession, but if it's a true confession and you're actually telling it again, and then you're telling it in front of another person that you don't necessarily have that, well, I don't know if it's a real relationship or rapport with,
Hmm.
but you're not there's definitely going to be some shame and some anxiety, and you're just by this time exhausted, and so it's going to be, I guess, maybe I think that at this point in time it's easy for extra information to leak out as well, and then they have a witness too, they have somebody else in the room who has heard it and can validate it.
And the second reason they go to step 8 is also for the reliability of the confession. Now, one of the reasons false confessions are sometimes given, you don't know all the details. You don't know that, like someone who commits like a home invasion and then they kill the homeowner, wouldn't someone who didn't do that crime wouldn't know that, hey, first what happened is we got into a struggle and knocked over a vase, then I hit him with a hammer, and of course the forensic evidence would say the vase was broken first, then the blood was on top of the broken vase. But someone who didn't commit the crime wouldn't know that.
Yeah,
And so
exactly.
that's why you're trying, okay, to walk me through what happened, take me through what happened. And if it starts lining up with the physical evidence at the scene, the forensic evidence, you know that this, you become more confident in the reliability of this confession. What sometimes happens with false confessions is they don't know what happened. Like, I blacked out, or I must have blacked out. I don't know what happened next. And it's what happens later when the reason they find, specifically the case of Daryl Parker, someone on death row admitted to the killing. The killing was of Daryl Parker's wife, who he was having this very a huge. Their marriage was breaking down. He had a huge argument with her, and so he confessed to killing her because some point he broke in the interrogation. He's just like, you know what? I don't know what happened that night. I got super drunk. I don't know what happened. Um, I don't know if he said he got drunk, but he said he like doesn't remember what happened that night, and so that he let the police plant the memory in his head that he was the killer, and he confessed to the crime. Then the guy on death row told his lawyer, "After I am dead, I want you to tell the police what happened to all of these other people I killed." And he was able to recount specific details that only the killer would have known at the crime scene.
Mhm.
Or DNA exclusion, right? 25% of people excluded by DNA gave a false confession under the Reid technique, which is actually the statistic that really inspired this video. So, they really are concerned with making sure that the confession is valid and reliable. And I believe that has been more of, and we're not going to go into the piece technique, but they have developed another interrogation technique to replace Reid because there's a lot of concerns about how this is it pressures people to give a false confession, which actually is right here in the first sentence, right?
Right, yeah, and think what it is that, when you use the Reid technique, it results in an 80% confession rate, and a quarter of those are false. So it's a real powerful tactic and can result in confessions, but the issue is that it wears people down, so badly that there are, a sizable number of false confessions that can come from this.
And You have experience with juveniles, right? Who are going through, who come in for mental health reasons. Um,
Mhm.
can you talk a little bit about why someone might admit to something that they didn't do? Like what's going on in their head, especially if they're stressed a lot at home.
Oh, well, I mean, if they're stressed at home, maybe they just want to get out of the house and they just don't even care what happens to their lives. But a lot of it is ignorance, and I think that programs like this, this show that you're doing right here, help people to understand and become informed. Kids are not informed about what can happen to them in a system and what the consequences of their actions and inactions are. So they could just confess to something that they didn't really do because they want to get out of the house. They don't want to go back home, or because they just don't know what the repercussions would be. They'll just say, I did it, whatever.
Yeah.
What's the worst that could happen to me? And they have no idea about the sentence and or what it's like in juvie, or if they're going to be tried as an adult. They have no clue about that stuff. But yeah, and they're also, a lot of them are the opposite way. They're just kind of cocky and they just don't think anything's going to happen to them. You saw
Yeah.
that with
Yeah.
Aiden Fucci. I mean, he was in the back of the cop car with his friend, just kind of going like, where's Tristan? Anybody see Tristan Bailey? And so they're sometimes they're just really, they don't have fully formulated brains yet too. So that's another issue with youth, and why they would maybe confess to something that they didn't do, or they just do something really stupid like send Snapchats in the back of a cop car. So anyway, that's
There,
my rant on youth. But most of the ones that I work with are pretty cool actually, and none of them have really been in much trouble at all.
well, and oftentimes, there's two reasons people come to you is because they don't want to get into trouble or because the court told them to come to you. And you're hoping it's the first one, but sometimes it's the latter, right?
Well, I don't think I've had any court mandated. I've had definitely had mandated, parent mandated
Okay.
youth,
Okay.
but I've not had any court mandated youth. The only ones that I've had are through are some adults through anger management, and they've all been really nice too. They've
Yeah.
been pretty pleasant. I've been actually pretty lucky in my career to have really good clients for
Well,
sure.
and sometimes the anger management can be court mandated as part of probation or a conditional discharge or suspended sentence or any of those other things, right?
Right,
Where
to see your kids again,
go get
you
help,
know.
go get help
E e
before we really put you in trouble. so,
Exactly.
um,
Yeah.
and then number 9 is just record. That's it.
Yeah.
So that's the
So
read
actually
technique.
documenting it in writing.
Yeah. Now the written statement, we'll jump over to that in a second, but that's the 9 steps of the Reid interrogation. So I want to play the clip from the show Law and Order right now to really
Oh,
demonstrate.
goody. Get out your popcorn, everybody. It's the good one.
Uh, yeah, it's gonna cut a little bit, but I'm okay with that.
All roads lead to
Can you hear this?
you, Dennis. From the gun to the old lady to the
You didn't hear it, did you? Oh, okay.
hospital to the ambulance to you.
I didn't kill anybody.
Oh, no? You know who's on juries nowadays? Women, right, Eddie? Most of them got nothing better to do than hang around and report for jury duty. Once they hear your take on women's rights, they'll cut your kiwis off and hand them to you on a stick.
You really want those bitches deciding if you live or die? You really want to give them that last bit of power? I mean, they already got both hands on the steering wheel. They're driving buses, directing traffic, working construction. Who the hell invited them to the party anyway? They should be at home, watching over their kids.
Detective Green.
Yes, ma'am. I got it right here. I'm sorry I didn't get it to you sooner. I've been in this house a month. There isn't a day that bitch doesn't ride my ass. Lenny, Detective Briscoe, he was in line for the job. He had the seniority. They made her lieutenant. bet it's the same where you work. You know what? It belittles us. It disrespects us. Isn't that what you felt? We don't sit around and mope, do we?
I'll just pause there for a second. Do you see where he's starting to wear down? He's starting to offer the alternatives, right? You don't have to confess to the killing, but tell me the motive. Why? Tell me, hey, you have it in for these people, don't you? They have wronged you, and you were justified, right? You see, they're breaking it down. They're breaking them down, and we're now at step like 4 or 5, getting into 6, where they start offering, okay, the less, the socially acceptable alternative.
You.
And
You
he's
tried to
standing
move
up,
the
and the accused is sitting down too. So there's that again, the power dynamic in real time and real life.
Now the good cop here, the one who's like, because of course, oh God, I forget these guys' names. I haven't watched Law and Order in years, but this one, he started out, he was pretty, he came in pretty tough as the interrogator, right? But now this one, he's come down to the killer's level. He says, look, I get it. I have problems with these people too. I understand you. Oh, you can open up to me. And you'll see as they, and this actor, credit to the actor who's playing the suspect here. He, you see the emotion in his face. He's wearing, he's acting out the emotion of like, all right, I'm starting to break down just a little bit. You saw the reaction when the female, the lieutenant came in and said, started barking orders at everyone.
Yeah,
he had a very visible reaction to that, and that's a credit to the actor. But I mean, these are the subtleties that the police can pick up on, and they just hammer in, they zone in on it. So I'll play it.
They should have been helping you, Dennis. Taking care of you. That's what women are for, to look out for you. But they let you down. They always have, haven't they? I saw your children's services file. Your old man beat on you. He beat your mother. I know what that's like. Your mother was supposed to look out for you, to protect you. She just let it happen, didn't she? She didn't protect her baby. And now, these women get a crack at killing you. Dennis, you are in a deep hole right now, man. There's only one way out. You tell us what you did. There's no trial, no jury, no death penalty. Please, man, please. Don't let them do this to you. Don't let them win. You tried hard to be a good man. And did they give you the respect you deserve?
Those bitch doctors at the hospital.
What about them, Dennis? What did they do?
Yeah, he broke. Now step 8. You saw that, right? He broke and he started, the at the he hasn't confessed anything yet. So now you actually have to get the details. What did you do? But you saw they just worked him and worked him and worked him, and now they broke him. Up until that point,
he had an agreement. He was just like, "Yep." And he agreed with the guy's narrative.
Mm-hmm. And you saw him. You saw the alternative. You did what you had to do. This isn't your fault. It's their fault.
Right.
Just finish off
if you're not smart enough, you fall for that.
There's only a minute
He
left.
said that I should apply to nursing school.
Okay.
See? They humiliated you. But in the park, you said everything right, didn't you?
Yeah.
You put them back in their place.
Yes.
And that's why you shot them, right?
Yes.
Bang. Well, actually, that was a bad choice of words. All right, that's enough for that. um. Uh. But yeah, you saw.
Bang.
Yeah, bang. Very poor choice of words. But anyways,
Oh
that's a.
God. Sorry. Hopefully, I didn't knock your sound system out.
Oh no, it's fine.
But-
No, but you
oh.
saw a perfect operation of the steps, right? We come back to the
Hmm.
steps, right? We're here. Try to shift blame away, right? Your dad beat you. Your mom was supposed to protect you. Give a
Yeah.
reason why. Here's your out. They humiliated you, and you see he's not talking. He's not protesting because up until that point, nope, didn't do a thing. Don't know what you're talking about. I wasn't there. Didn't do a thing. So now he's quiet and listening because they got him. They've got him hooked in on this narrative, right? All right, maybe we
Mhm.
got some alternatives. And he's starting to break at this point. So you infer, you come down to the next one, you set them straight. You set them straight. Don't imply that you did the murder, just set them straight. Now that you break them, get them to confess to the murder. Step 8.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was, and there was actually a moment in there where they promised to spare him the death penalty. That's very
Mm.
tricky. You don't want to be, if you're the police, you don't get to make those promises. It's up to the prosecutor of whether they're going to pursue the death penalty in sentencing.
Yeah, and you
They
want to
might have,
remember that the context of this was that somebody did a mass shooting on a
yeah,
campus, and they just killed females, and they were just around, the
yeah,
outside of campus and everything too. So I mean, he would have gotten the death penalty if it was a death penalty state.
yes. New York State, I don't think has the death penalty anymore. I believe
Oh,
Law and Order takes place in New York.
oh,
Um,
okay,
I
yeah,
Maybe they
but
do. I
maybe
don't
not.
know. But
Maybe not then.
regardless, if you're the
Maybe,
police, you don't get to decide that. That's not your promise to make. Um, you could say, "I will talk to the prosecutor," right? You can say things like that, but you can't. You can't do the quid pro quo. Hey, in exchange for your confession, we'll spare you the chair.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, that's for the jury to sort out, but,
Right.
yeah, I appreciated that, and I think when I first saw it, I was thinking, "But was that a false confession or what?" Because it kinda went by a little fast as
Yeah,
far as, the how they connected him to the scene, the crime scene,
it
and I
did.
think it was the backpack, right?
The backpack. There was an eyewitness in his
And
car.
an
I think.
eyewitness, yeah. Right, yeah,
That
so there was
connected them.
enough evidence there,
Yeah.
so that they could go ahead and
They
use that
also
technique.
the reason they know that it was a gender motivated thing is they had read he I guess he had some like online social media
Yep.
posts, so they knew that that was the angle they could go in on. Um
Mhm.
and yeah, like you know,
The stuff from
this
his
was
his childhood and stuff like that.
mhm.
They know all that stuff. They can get access to stuff about people, so they know
This
what
was
to use
modeled
against you.
after a real life event. It was the École Polytechnique massacre in Montreal, where a man who had been denied a position in the engineering school because that school had a quota of hiring accepting 50% of women. He believed that he had been denied a place in the engineering school because a woman took it,
Mm.
and so he committed a mass murder and it was a like he stacked up like 16 bodies on
Oh
in
my
that one. It
goodness,
was a
that's a lot.
yeah terrifying. It was what up until the Nova Scotia shooter, it was our worst mass shooting.
That
This
is a
was
big
back in
one,
1989, I think. Um,
especially for Canada.
he used an AR-15 style rifle. I think it was a possibly a Ruger, which was legal in Canada at the time, is no longer legal, mostly in part thanks to that. Um, thanks to that situation. Anyways,
Mhm.
I don't know if we're gonna
Yeah.
get a chance to go into this too deeply because we're coming up on my hard cutoff. I have to get going
I
here
know.
soon. There was
Yes, you have a
something,
test to take, a
yeah.
test to pass and, with flying colors and do you get graded on these tests?
Oh yeah, Do I
Okay, are
ever?
you gonna get an A plus on, right? This is the test that you're gonna get an A plus on?
Probably not, because I have not printed off anything that I wanted to print off.
Oh, well, you'll do just fine because you can think on your feet and you know the material, right?
Just got to know my constitutional law, because it's
Yeah,
a
that's
it's
it.
a
Oh,
charter
just
challenge.
memorize the book.
Yep,
Memorize the book.
memorized the 1,400 and some pages in there. All right, Tracy, any final thoughts on just this topic overall? Were you surprised by anything? Is there something that really stuck out to you?
Well, I really don't like that cops can lie, but I get why they would want. I mean, because think about all the people who are put behind bars using this technique that deserve to be behind bars, and that's where my mind went after I said, "Well, it's kind of messed up that cops can lie, deceive, even lie about your polygraph results." But you know, what I found interesting is this sort of point to where if you're interrogating a person, people who are guilty have more nervousness as you go along in the interrogation, and you can kind of see it from that clip you just showed. And then but innocent people are supposed to have decreased anxiety as the interrogation progresses, just because the person really has nowhere to go with it. But I would say that if I was innocent and I was being kept in a room for a long time, I would think my anxiety would go up. But that statistically speaking, guilty people have more nervousness the longer the interrogation goes, and innocent people have less anxiety or nervousness as the interrogation progresses. I think the
Yeah.
other thing that that really surprised me was just that people can use this technique when they don't have reasonable evidence to prove that they are, indeed guilty of something, and they can just use it anyway. And so that's improperly used read technique. Can result in false confessions. I didn't realize we had so many false confession rates. There's something about the Innocent
Yep.
Project, or is that what it's called?
Yep. The
Yeah, that
Innocence
will
Project.
actually help people who think that they are wrongly convicted, put in prison for the wrong reasons. And so thankfully, we have organizations like that to help.
All right, Tracy. Thanks for very much for joining me. Plug your stuff. Where can people
Absolutely.
find you?
Well, let's see. You can come on over to my YouTube channel, which is Calming the Chaos podcast. We do podcast interviews and some interesting films that I do, just kind of goofy stuff and educational stuff, just about anxiety, overwhelm, how to find peace in a chaotic world. Just look me up on YouTube. Look for the purple because that is my favorite color. And that's about it. I mean, you can find me around YouTube. You can find me here sometimes. I'm in your chat. So, yeah, I appreciate you having me on today. And I learned a lot just by preparing for this. If there's any chance you can put a link to the parody in your description, that would be
Sure.
awesome. I don't think I can drop links, but I love that thing it's only like 2 or 3 minutes long, but it's a crack up and it's a really good example about how the read technique works in a parody.
I've added
Yeah.
you as a moderator. You should be able to drop links into my chat,
Oh,
but I will add it to the description. It's just I have to wait till after I get back tonight
I can put a comment on under this video too. Um,
or in the live chat. But anyways, that will be it for everyone today. For thanks everyone for joining us. Let me know if you enjoy this type of content. I love going into this stuff. I didn't even get a chance to talk about the Mr. Big operation because we ran out of time.
Mr.
That's a
Big.
Canadian invention where we send an undercover posing as a major crime boss, and gets this is like a long term sting operation, and he gets your trust and then starts telling you, well, hey, I need to know I can trust you, so you got something to get off your chest, and they confess to a crime.
Interesting.
So that's called the Mr.
Wow.
Big operation. R versus Hart would be the case law on that one. So,
Awesome.
anyways,
Well, I hope you do well on your tests. I know you will. And take care. And I will see you around the YouTube land and in Discord.